Pan. He is just determined to knock over my tripod, so I might just do this entire vlog holding Pan again. I don't think people will really complain. So today I would like to talk about chan, san, kun, sama, and all those suffixes that Japanese people add to names, and you'll see these a lot in anime and other things, and why I think that putting them in the subtitles is a bad idea. And before, like, you already just dislike the video and start commenting negatively on it, or like stop watching because you disagree. It's like, hear me out. I used to believe, when I was a teenager and a fresh anime otaku, I used to believe that you should always leave the honorifics in with the subtitles. I felt like the translation was missing something, like some kind of nuance about the characters and their relationships to each other. I felt that was missing if you were leaving the suffixes out of the subtitles. Getting a little bit ahead of myself, because it occurs to me that people watching this video might not know what those suffixes are. So I'll just, oh my goodness, you are so heavy. Pan, I love you, but you're way too, he weighs 18 pounds, people, okay. Just be a good boy. Oh. I love fat cats. So I'm just going to very briefly go over all of those suffixes, like the main ones, and what they mean. So first we have chan. It is the suffix added to usually girls' names, and sometimes boys if they're young, like 5 years old or younger. And it is an affectionate term, and kind of, you know, like a, oh, you're so cute, I'm going to add chan to the end of your name. It can even be added to the end of like inanimate objects, like if you want to be like, oh, you're such a cute little table, you'd be like, oh, table-chan, you know, it's kind of like that. But also, there are some negative connotations with chan. Like if I were a bro and I was like hanging out with my other bros and this other dude walked past us who was like as old as we are, like we're in our early 20s and we're in college, and this like nerdy guy walks by and we're like, hey there, Dan-chan, how's it going? It's like really condescending in that case, like if you use chan to describe somebody who's older, like, and chan, the suffix, doesn't really fit that person, then it's kind of an insult. So that's chan in a nutshell. Then you got san, which is kind of the main default sort of honorific. San is just a general polite suffix, usually used with people that are older than you or higher ranking than you, and it's just kind of a term of respect for somebody. But a mistake that a lot of foreigners make, and myself included, like when people first called me Sarah-san, I was kind of like hurt a little bit by it because I felt like they were distancing me from them by calling me san. It's like, oh, why are you calling me san? I'm a silly person and I like fart jokes and I'm totally a chan, call me chan. But like they felt uncomfortable calling me chan because to them I was like this mature, sophisticated like gaijin, and chan didn't really suit me. They called me san. Just as a sign of like being nice and polite. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like, oh, san, like I worship you. People can call each other san if they're friends, and even if they're married. Like it's kind of this like sign that you're still trying hard to please them and impress them kind of thing. So san has a lot of nuances as well. Kun is a suffix that's usually used with boys. But not always. It can be used with work colleagues. It's kind of weird though, like I have only really seen it used in that scenario in manga or anime or things like that. Like I have not actually in my life, like in my real life, actual life interacting with Japanese people, I've never really heard anyone call anyone kun unless it's a boy. But then again, I've never worked in a Japanese office, so I don't know. Maybe somebody who has can fill me in on that. But kun, it's mostly boys, and for that matter, mostly kind of younger boys. Like if there's a guy who's 19 years old and then there's another guy who's 15 years old, the 19-year-old guy can call the 15-year-old guy kun, but the 15-year-old guy, if you were to call the 19-year-old guy kun, that would kind of be an insult. It's kind of like chan that way. Like if you call someone who's above you in status by kun, then that's insulting, kind of. Like, unless you guys are really cool and you're friends and it's like this playful thing you do. So sama is an honorific that is more like for people of very high authority, like kings and queens and emperors and stuff like that. But not just that. If you are a customer somewhere, you're like sama. If you're a guest anywhere, you are also sama. Because in Japan, like, hospitality is like really super big there. They're just like, oh my god, the customer, like in America, the customer is always right. In Japan, the customer is God. So sama is used that way. It's also used in letters. Like if you're addressing someone, you'll say, like if you wrote me a letter, you'd say Sera-sama. You know, that's how you'd address it, which is kind of funny. So there are more suffixes, but those are just the basic four. Just quick crash course on those suffixes for people who are unfamiliar with them. So here is why I kind of already touched upon reasons why I don't like those being in subtitles. So you may have heard me use the word nuanced earlier, and that's just the thing. These suffixes are very nuanced. They don't always mean the same thing. Chan doesn't always mean, like, it's a cute suffix. Kun doesn't always mean, oh, it's a suffix for a boy. San doesn't always mean, like, Mr. or Ms. or just respectful term for older person. And sama does not always mean, like, prince, princess, lord, lady. They're very, very nuanced. And depending on the speaker, depending on the relationship between the two people, depending on the context, these suffixes will always mean something very slightly different. And I'm talking about this in real life, but also in the context, especially in the context of stories, which is what I translate. Here's the thing. When you are watching a movie, when you are reading a book, when you are digesting a story, what you are doing, attempting to do at least, is to have a sort of cathartic experience through connecting emotionally with the characters and with the situations that are happening to them, and feeling empathy for them. So the problem I find with using these little Japanese suffixes attached to people's names is that while they mean something on an emotional level to Japanese people who were born using these suffixes and hearing these suffixes all the time, they connect more with those suffixes. But we, as anime otaku, like, you can know intellectually what they mean, you can even know intellectually what all the nuances might mean, but it's still not going to hit you in that same way that it would hit a Japanese person. Like, let's say there's a character and she's called Chan by a guy that she likes, and it kind of makes her feel blue because she's thinking, oh man, he must think that I'm really immature. Now see, this is like a classic example of a very Japanese girl romance trope. Japanese girls, at least in the romances, are usually very insecure about their maturity, and they want men to see them as mature, sophisticated women. They don't want men to see them as cutesy little ah ha 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 with high-pitched voices, right? So this concept of when he calls her Chan, perhaps, like let's say he's with this really pretty, mature, sophisticated woman, like next to him, and he introduces, you know, you, the MC, to her as like Chan, like your name Chan. And then that kind of just hits you like, oh man. As a reader, as an American reader, or as a Western reader, as somebody whose native language is not Japanese and who did not grow up hearing Chan and hearing those suffixes, that's just not going to hit you the same way emotionally as it would if I had found some other way to convey what just happened there. What happened literally was he called you Chan, yeah? But what actually happened was he implied through calling you Chan that he thinks you're young and you're cute. And meanwhile, there's this older, sophisticated woman there that you are jealous of and feel very insecure about. See how layered that can be and how nuanced that is? And if you just translate it as Chan, even if you explain in translator's notes, it's like, I want the viewers, when they're watching that, in the moment to go, oh shit, he just, you know, called her this thing, right? So if I were translating that in like that scenario that I just described, instead of saying, oh hi, let me introduce, like, this is Sarah-chan, I would probably do something like, oh, this is my little friend, or oh, this is my friend, or I'd say something like she's like a sister to me, or something like that, like that would have more emotional impact for the person who's watching it, so that we know as viewers, oh shit, like, he totally just dissed her, he totally just made her feel like a little girl and made her feel like not beautiful and stuff. So that's one example. That's one reason why I don't think that these honorifics should be in the subtitles as is. I think as translators we should find different ways of incorporating those concepts and those ideas into the translation other than using the literal chan-san, kun-sama, etc. Another reason I don't like chan, kun, san, sama, etc. in the subtitles is that if it's anime and it's subtitled, most of the people watching will be able to hear these suffixes anyway. So it seems redundant to me to include those. Now, you may argue, okay, well, what about the hard of hearing? Or what about people that watch their anime really, really quietly or silently so as not to disturb their roommates? Okay, fine. But again, back to my original point of, I think that there are different ways of showing in the translation what's going on. The main purpose of these honorifics is to show a person's status, particularly compared to the speaker. But it also shows the relationship between those two people. So like if I call somebody san, that probably means that that person is older than I am or is somehow above me in status, or maybe we are equals, but we both respect each other. We have that kind of relationship. So there are other ways of showing what a character's status is or what the relationship between characters are other than using the honorifics. It's much more subtle in English. In Japanese, it's very clean cut. It's like, I'm using the polite verb endings with you and I'm using san. Like, therefore, I treat you with respect and we have like sort of a business relationship or you're a little bit above me in age or in stature somehow, or, you know, we're just very polite people around each other. Like, some people are just like that too. They're just polite. But there are other ways, there are more nuanced ways of showing that in English. It'll be maybe you'll be more careful with the kind of vocabulary you use around somebody that you respect more. Your diction might be clearer, which can't be shown in subtitles, but it can to some extent. There would be less slang, there would be less contractions. The vocabulary used would just be a little more elevated, a little more good. So not that word. A little more specific and appropriate. But the final reason why I don't like using chan, san, kun, sama, etc. in subtitles, and this is actually a really big reason, is very simply that it jumbles things up. It makes things look really muddy in the subtitles when you're trying to read it. To have this hyphen and then the suffix, especially if you're trying to say like, this was Machiko-chan's ball. It's like Machiko hyphen chan apostrophe z and then ball, and it just becomes so muddy and just so many characters. And then it also, when you're putting subtitles into an anime, you have to be careful not to exceed the character limit, and it makes it easier to exceed the character limit if you have this hyphen and this suffix after a person's name. So that's another reason why I don't like suffixes in subtitles. And there are, of course, plenty of exceptions. I think if an anime or if a story is like super, super Japanese, or if it's kind of educationally Japanese in a way, if that makes any sense, if the source material or if the story is very like, this is definitely Japanese, or if there's some kind of pun or some kind of joke or some kind of thing that happens later on where it's extremely important that that suffix specifically was used, and there's just no way that that could have been reworked into English and still make sense, then totally, like, I can understand leaving the suffixes in. And then naturally, of course, as a translator, I usually don't have a say in if the honorifics are left in and out. When I do otome games, generally speaking, they say no honorifics. They want more localization of the translation, so they don't want any of that. They don't want chan-san, kun-sama, etc. And to be fair, fans of otome games, while there is plenty of crossover, and there are a lot of fans of otome games who are also anime and manga fans, there are also people who play otome games that aren't like necessarily into anime, and they don't want to alienate those players or those potential players by having like this, you know, san, chan, and they're all confused, like, what is this? But one of the companies for whom I translated anime, they're like, yeah, we know our constituency.
I bet you watch Disney dubs of Miyazaki films, noob!
We know they're anime otaku. We know that they like things to at least sound or seem a little more on the literal side and less on the localized side. So please leave in the honorifics. And I've begrudgingly left them in.
You're not a real fan. I bet you've never even seen Gundam.
Again, I doubt that this video even necessarily convinced that many people, if people actually watched it who are strongly in favor of leaving the suffixes in. If you have any like points that I forgot to address, I mean, I just kind of rambled this. I didn't really write any notes in advance. These are mostly like the main thoughts I have at the forefront of my brain as to why I tell people that I don't like including honorifics in my translations. So if you have any points that I didn't bring up or any rebuttals, I'd be happy to address them later in another video if there's enough, or in the comments. This is just my plea to everyone as a translator to please consider this side of the argument. I know otaku tend to prefer their translations on the literal side, or they think that they prefer their translations on the literal side. Again, I used to be one of you. Like when I was a teenager and before I knew Japanese better, I even called my friends chan sometimes. So it's like, I totally get where you're coming from. I'm just begging you to consider